So you essentially wind up getting all of the notes about what to improve or what could be done better while you're getting the grade after you sort of lost the opportunity to use that feedback, which can be really frustrating. The other problem is it stresses me out because if I know I have to assign a grade to something, it's a lot less exciting for me because I mean, assigning grades, like I didn't become a teacher because I live to turn human beings into numbers, right? I became a teacher because I like people to learn new stuff, and grading is just one of the tools that I use to help people learn things. So for me, the grading needs to be like a quick, here's where we are right now, basic rubric kind of like number to the equation. But the feedback happens earlier. It's qualitative. It's my investment in your project. It's a devotion of time, and it's less stressful because I know I don't have to put a number at the end of it. So I'm more likely to kind of do it with more energy. So I have you submit drafts for feedback. I don't grade the drafts. I don't penalize you for not doing the drafts. But I will say, if you're not doing the drafts, it's hard for me to imagine the paper is going to turn out really well. So when I tell you that there's an opportunity for a draft coming up, because again, in 3 weeks, which is all we've got, there's only going to be one opportunity per paper. You really need to submit a draft. So if you choose not to, again, it's fine. I mean, it's your choice. I'm not going to be mad about it. But it's definitely going to disadvantage you vis-a-vis the final grade. And once the final paper happens, I'm not going to spend all this time giving you feedback. I'd rather give you feedback on an early draft. So when I say a draft is due, just write whatever you can manage. It may not be the whole paper, but if it's something, I can at least give you some kind of idea about where you might go or what you might do from here. I provide a lot of information on the papers. I do a webinar for the papers. I give you sample papers that you can basically just copy. So I do try to scaffold the papers very thoroughly, but the best thing you can do for yourself on those papers is to make sure I see a draft early. But again, since I'm not grading you, it's really easy to not submit them, but it's not going to turn out well. I'll just say that. One other thing that might happen is when you turn in assignments. So you've got 4 discussion posts, 2 papers, and 2 exams. Everything goes to Canvas. So even though I'll ask for the drafts in Google Docs because it's just easier for me to add edits, or I might send links to a lot of stuff, or we use a lot of different technology, I do not want you emailing me things to be graded. So if I say it's due, please put it in Canvas in the assignment Dropbox, and please make sure it's in there. So a lot of times I'll say like, okay, the paper's due at midnight on Tuesday. And then Wednesday at midnight, I'll get around to giving the grades out, and I give a 0 to a paper because I didn't get it. And then someone says, oh, well, I thought it was submitted. It's like, well, it's not that hard to submit the paper and then 5 minutes later, go back into Canvas and see if there's an actual submission there, right? It's going to be sitting right there in the submitted box. So you really need to double check that because, again, with as fast as this course is going to move, we might be a week out from the end of the semester before I even know the paper's missing. And then all of a sudden we got to play like, oh, well, did you submit it? I don't want to play that. So you really got to double check that if you've submitted an assignment, it's submitted on time. I don't really have a strong late penalty for work. I'll go over that again in a minute. But it's important that when you submit it on time, that you double check that it's been submitted. And then the last thing is we don't use a textbook in the class. We use a course pack. And what I've tried to do with the course pack is really narrow it down to only the things that I really want you to learn. So rather than saying like, here's a textbook chapter, learn everything, and here's the 10 things that are going to be on the test, I really try to give you separate readings or videos or podcasts covering just the things that I want you to focus on. So it's not like a textbook. It can be a little jumpy because many of the units or the modules are a collection of disconnected texts that cover different types of theories, but they're all related under a certain theme. And I try to do introductory videos for every unit. So there's 8 modules, I believe, and I'm going to try to do an introductory video for every one just to kind of tell you how all of the different readings work together and what you're supposed to be getting out of it. Sorry, this is not a great microphone. I have to buy a better mic because this one is scratching. Okay. All right. So that is all I have to say about intro to the video. But let me just quickly, I'm going to move myself over here and look at the syllabus because I just want to go over a couple of things. So for the most part, you can just read the syllabus. It's on Canvas. I've emailed it to you. It's like in a million places. You'll see I'm holding office hours virtually every day, 12 to 1. So you can log on through Google Meet by phone or by virtual chat. I'll talk more about Slack in a later tutorial. The objectives of the course, like I've already said, it's a relational perspective on communication in small and one-on-one groups. It's also a lot of focus on your headspace. That's kind of the basic gist of the whole semester. There's a course pack. I've talked about the 2 essays, the midterm final, and the discussion posts. One thing to note about the discussion post is that if you do the research requirement, which is 3% of your grade, you also get the lowest discussion post dropped. So it's kind of like a double benefit to have done that. And the research requirement's easy. I'll talk about that later in the semester. You just do some studies online. When you look at the assessment and grading criteria, you'll see a note that I separate grades from feedback. I've already talked about that and why I do that. There's a little information about how to appeal a grade if you're dissatisfied with the grade. That's pretty straightforward. The communication majors and minors need a C- or higher for the course to successfully complete the department writing requirement. So if you're a major minor, that's especially important. And then the research credit. Regarding due dates, which is at the bottom of page 2, essays and discussion posts should be submitted by the due date and time. If you submit all of your work on time, okay, so students who submit all of their essays and discussion posts on time, that means before the midnight deadline on whatever date that I've established, you will have the lowest grade of the 2 exams replaced with the average grade. So if you get a 60 on the midterm, I hope not, but let's say you do, and 100 on the final, if you've submitted all your work on time, I'll take the average of 60 and 80, which is 60 and 100, which is 80, and I'll replace the 60 with the 80. So it's a considerable benefit to turning your work in on time. I don't like to penalize people, so I don't have if you submit your work late, then it's X number of points a day. I don't know, it's just not really my style. So there's an incentive instead. However, at a certain point, I need the work, right? Like I can't debate it. So the way that it works is that if you miss the assignment deadline, there's no penalty, but you have to have it in before I finish grading. And typically for a winter class like this, I'm going to finish the grading sometime between 1 and 3 days. Once grading is complete, so let's say that it's due Tuesday at midnight and you don't get the paper in. And let's say by Wednesday at midnight, I'm not done grading yet. So you still don't have the paper in. And let's say by Thursday at midnight, I have finished grading. I'm going to send out an email and I'm going to say, hey, I just finished grading the paper, right? Your paper's still not in. You'll have 24 hours to get the assignment in from that point for half off. So like basically half of whatever you submit. So it's just kind of like a partial credit. Here's a Hail Mary just to give you something to go on. And then beyond that, it pretty much depends. I mean, if you have some kind of extenuating circumstance or some sort of emergency, I'll think about it. It's about all I can tell you. I want to be flexible, but I just cannot let all this work pile up. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. And rarely in these situations do people wind up turning in good work. I'd rather you just focused on the rest of the class instead of trying to play catch up and turning in some crappy paper that isn't even going to be that good. So again, it kind of depends. The exams are a little different because I can't really just give you carte blanche to do the exams whenever. So the exams will be open for 24 hours. So they're going to open at 12:01 a.m. on the day they're assigned and close at midnight. You can take them anytime in that window. You'll need 75 minutes. So you set aside 75 minutes. It can be 2 a.m. It can be 2 a.m. It can be 11 p.m., whatever works for you. Makeup and late exams really aren't available. You're kind of just going to have to take them in the window when they're assigned. But again, if something happens and you really can't do it, I can arrange for a proctored, which means somebody will, probably me, will supervise you taking the test on the webcam. And it'll be a short answer identification exam to replace one or both multiple choice. So I'll just have to take it, as people request it based on circumstances. But ideally, you just get the work in on time because I've never been in a situation where turning in work late ever benefited anybody. It's not like if the paper's due on Tuesday and you take until Thursday to write it, it's a much better paper. Usually it's a worse paper because you didn't start it till Tuesday. So my recommendation is just get the work done on time, and there's a very significant bonus for doing that. Then there's some stuff about religious holidays. If you observe a religious holiday, just get in touch with me. Disability services. I don't know how that works if you're not a Geneseo student. I'm sure that the Office of Disability Services on your campus can send me something. But I will say, I already give everybody time and a half on exams. So if the standard is 1 minute per multiple choice question and we have 60 multiple choice questions, instead of giving everyone 60 minutes, I give everyone 90 minutes. And then I don't have to worry about time and a half because frankly, if somebody needs it, I figure everybody needs it. So in that sense, that's already covered. Academic dishonesty. It's not really a problem. I kind of set the class up so it's pretty hard to be dishonest. If you're turning in drafts of the paper, if you're writing according to the expectations, you're allowed to use notes on the exam, but since they're timed, you can't use your textbook because you couldn't look everything up even if you wanted to. So I've tried to control for academic dishonesty wherever possible. But if it does wind up happening, I'll approach you. We can chat about it. It might have just been a mistake, and we can take it from there. But I sort of have a pretty like educational approach to academic dishonesty. And then I have information about inclusivity and non-discrimination, as well as interpersonal violence, just to make sure that you feel safe and that you're in a harassment-free learning environment. That's very important. I also use gender-neutral language. I don't say you guys. I don't say, hey, ladies and gentlemen. And if you do, and I do try to check with people's pronouns, I use she, hers. So when you write to me or when you engage with me, if you want to add your pronouns at the end so that we know what we use, I think that that would be helpful. But if I don't know, I'll just kind of say, what pronouns do you use? And you can let me know. And then at the bottom of the syllabus, you'll see a link to the course schedule. And that, again, has the day-by-day events and a bunch of other things. So as you can see, my syllabus is pretty straightforward. The policies are pretty basic. And honestly, they work really well. I rarely have an issue during the semester. I keep all my grades up to date in Canvas. So at any point, you'll know exactly where you stand in the class. And you can always reach out to me if for some reason a grade is missing that you think that you're supposed to have. And I guess beyond that, I don't really have a lot else to say. 20 minutes is about usually what it takes me to do this on syllabus day. If we were face-to-face in a classroom, I would normally have us do an activity or get to know each other, but we're going to use the first discussion post for that. So the last thing I guess I'll say is that it's going to be a fast 3 weeks. I have to, by contract, teach you the same material in this 3 weeks that I teach everyone else over 15 weeks. So we will all do the best we can, and if at any point you're feeling overwhelmed or frustrated, I do encourage you to reach out to me. I'm very easy to get a hold of. I have email on all the time. Slack, we're going to use Slack for instant messaging, which I think will keep people more engaged in the course. And you'll just have to let me know if you're finding things overwhelming or if you're having trouble keeping up. But one thing I will say is it's easy to forget about the class. Like, it's easy for me too. I mean, it's Friday, it's the middle of January, it's snowing outside, you're exhausted, you don't want to read about romantic communication. I get it. I don't want to grade your papers. Like, I don't. But a couple things. One, I have to, and putting things off isn't going to make them go away. So if I don't grade your papers right now on Friday afternoon, it's not like suddenly some fairy is going to grade them for me by magic. I still have to get them graded. So eventually, it's going to have to happen. So I like to remind myself that it's not a question of if I'm going to do this stuff, it's a question of how much I'm going to suffer in the meantime. And since I don't like suffering, I choose to just say, okay, I'm going to get it done. Second, in the grand scheme of things, opening up your laptop or your Kindle and reading a couple PDFs or listening to a podcast while you walk on the treadmill or walk your dog outside, these are not suffering activities. You may not like always everything you read, but I've tried to pick interesting stuff. It's all very relevant to your life, and whether you want to admit it or not, all this stuff is stuff that you need to think about as an individual. So in that sense, it's really a privilege, I think, to be able to spend your time thinking about how you behave and learning and engaging in meta-reflection. So it helps if instead of thinking about all this stuff as stuff you have to do, thinking about it as stuff you get to do. And you may not always want to do it, but you still get to do it. And that's a better attitude than like, oh man, I have to do this reading. It's like, well, you don't have to. You could fail and lose all the money that you spent on the class and have to retake it again in the spring. You have choices. I think that the better choice is that you've committed to the class, you've paid the money, and you're like ready to go, and you just realize that you're going to enjoy some of the activities and the readings and the podcasts, and some of them are not going to be your favorite, but that's just kind of how life works. So you look for the things that you really enjoy, you immerse yourself in those things, and then everything else, you just kind of recognize that with all good things come bad things. But it's important that you stay on top of your email. It's important that you check in with Canvas. It's important that you create some kind of schedule for yourself, because the 3 weeks will go by fast. And if you take a couple days off in the beginning of January because you just didn't feel like it, it is going to catch up with you. And at a certain point, there won't be much that I can do to get you back on track. So do try to stay conscientious, and just remember that you signed up for this. This is something that presumably you want to do. I signed up for it because I want to. I didn't have to teach intercession. I could have just taken the 5 weeks off, right? But I like teaching. I like teaching online. I like making videos. I like the feedback that I get in a different learning environment. I like tweaking my interpersonal class over the break with new students so I can see what I can do during the regular semester. So again, we're all here presumably because we want to be. And so I would just say try to keep that in the front of your mind when it's cold outside and you don't want to check your email and you don't really feel like reading. And with that, I will leave you, and please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and have a great 3 weeks. Bye.